Hi everyone, my name is Jennifer. I'm a watercolor artist, and if you've seen some of my videos before, you'll know that what I really love to do is paint greeting cards. So today I'm going to show you how I'm going to paint this very simple greeting card with a fall theme. And so what I'm doing here is I thought I would start making some pumpkins, and I'm thinking I'm going to do sort of some stacked pumpkins. So one on top of the other, and create kind of a little tower, and that will be kind of a nice way to have a greeting card that starts to celebrate fall. It's actually pretty warm still where I am, so I'm kind of hoping that the temperatures cool down just slightly so that fall actually makes its way here, and I think painting it is just a nice way to help it come along. So I've just started here by doing kind of two shapes to start off my pumpkin, and I'm going for kind of a loose pumpkin shape. So I'm just painting rather in a gray color, these kind of oblong kind of shapes, and I'm making sure that I'm leaving a space in between, and that's going to really create my my pumpkin shape. So I'm just going ahead here, and I'm going to make the one at the bottom kind of the largest one. So make sure that it really has kind of ample room at the bottom to support the pumpkins that I will paint on top. So I'm kind of going along here. I'm imagining what the bottom of that pumpkin might look like. And I'm doing three kind of big shapes and making sure they convene at the top. And then once that's dry, I'm going to put my stem. And I think what I'll do is go for kind of a black stem, and then I've pulled out two different blues that you'll see here, and I think I'm going to make each pumpkin on top a different color. So this one will be gray, and then there'll be two blues sort of at the top. And then I'm kind of following along here and imagining the curved kind of line of my pumpkin. And then I'm going to make a smaller shape right here, which would be kind of the curved part of the pumpkin that you wouldn't see entirely if you were looking at the pumpkin from the front. I'll put a little bit more of my gray here and imagine kind of that curve. And then you see I'm making it a little bit kind of flatter at the bottom. And what I think I might do is add I'm going to mix a little bit more of my gray color here. So I'll show you. I'm using this gray here, and I'm going to mix it with a little bit of black here, this color right here, just a little bit of black, which you'll see right here, just so I'm getting a little bit of a darker tone so that I can add that in to certain areas of my pumpkin to create a bit of a shadow. So this section right here, I'm going to make a tad darker and move that paint around like so. And then I would imagine a shadow kind of at the bottom of my pumpkin here where it sort of hits the ground. So I'm going to add a little bit more dark paint at the bottom here, and then kind of blend it in to make sure I don't get kind of a distinctive line. And I'm doing it while my paint is still wet, which makes it much easier to not get that line. So I think I'm pretty happy with that. Definitely an heirloom looking pumpkin, but that's okay. That's what I like. So that looks pretty nice. And what I will say is for the rest of my colors, what I've done is that I put a little bit of that same gray color into my blue. And I find that doing that is a nice way to make sure that all the colors kind of meld together. So I'm going to wait for that to dry now, and then we'll do our stem. Okay, so my pumpkin has dried now, and I can go ahead and make my stem. And I'm going to imagine where that stem kind of goes, and I'm imagining it kind of right here. And I'm just using a dark kind of black color to make that stem. Oh, and I should mention, I'm kind of free painting these because that's kind of the look that I'm going for. But of course, what you could do if you wanted to is use a pencil line and go ahead and sketch those pumpkins before you paint them if you're a bit nervous about where you want them to fit on the page. But if you do that, of course, make sure that you're doing a pretty thin line so that then you're able to erase that line a little bit and it's very faint so that it doesn't kind of peek through underneath your paint. But otherwise you can kind of go away and go ahead and paint it like I am, just kind of free shaping it, and that works as well. So that's the tip here, and now I'm going to wait for that to dry as well, and then I'll do my top pumpkin. Okay, so that's nice and dry now, and I'm going to go ahead and paint my pumpkin on top of this one. If you've ever seen kind of a stack of pumpkins where there's like a bigger pumpkin at the bottom and then a smaller one on top and a teeny tiny one on top, that's kind of what I'm going for here. So I'm just going to kind of imagine what that top pumpkin might look like and start doing my first shape here. So as I said, I'm using kind of a blue color that I've mixed with a tiny bit of gray, and I find that that just helps make sure that all my colors go really nicely together. So I'm going to go right at the edge at the line here and imagine what that might look like. So it might take me a little bit of time just to get that shape looking the way I want it, but let's take a look. So I'm going to add a little bit more, make kind of my bigger section here, like so. And slowly taking shape. It doesn't always look exactly like a pumpkin until you've gotten your entire shape together. So let's see. Imagining kind of a rounder pumpkin here. Maybe this is the third kind of section down here. I'm kind of using the same method before, making it as I did before, making sure that I'm leaving kind of a circle. Sorry, not a circle. I mean a little bit of blank space in between my pumpkin wedges, so to speak, and that kind of makes it so that it looks like a pumpkin. That's kind of what brings it all together, is that white space. I think that's slowly taking shape. I think what I might do is just a very kind of thin, smaller section here. That would be the section slightly out of view. And that's going to help give it that kind of color. And I think what I'll do is I'll take a tiny bit of my darker blue from the pumpkin that's going to go on top and add a little bit of that hue into my blue here, just so that I can ever so slightly add a little bit of a shadow with that darker color on a couple of the sections that I want to have kind of a bit darker. So maybe here at the bottom where both pumpkins would kind of join and meet, I can imagine that being a little bit darker right here, and then on the sides here, just adding a little bit of dimension. Can you see that? Yeah, just a little bit. So, and I thought it does help to use a little bit of that darker tone to do that. So there we go. Can you imagine that pumpkin on top? Here we are. And then let's see, I'm going to let that dry now, and then I'll come right back with you. Okay, and then now I'll add in my stem. So I'm going to do the same thing, use a bit of black and make my stem here right at the top of this blue pumpkin. And I think I'm going to do a stem that's a little bit more curved for this one and a little bit thinner. So I'm imagining it kind of like so. That looks pretty good. And I think that's what I like about pumpkins, is that they all look different, obviously, and they can all have like a nice heirloom shape. And I think that's what makes it look kind of the nicest, is when you're able to have three kind of distinctively shaped pumpkins so that they look just as odd and beautiful as they would in nature. And I don't think I'm going to let that one completely dry, because I think I can go ahead and make this one a little bit on the side here. So I think so that's my darker blue, and I'm going to go ahead and shape a small pumpkin right here. So I'll start with my kind of center wedge, if you will, right here. It looks a little bit like a rocket ship, but let's give that a second. Here, let's go ahead right here. Imagine this going kind of curved this way. And then let's see, kind of a curve on this side. Kind of playing with fire here by not having let that completely dry. But if you're doing that at home, of course, take your time. How does that look? That looks pretty good. So it's a smaller one, so I'm doing a bit less wedges. And I'll add a little bit of color, putting a little bit of gray back into this black here, into this dark blue here. And then adding a little bit of color here, kind of on the sides, just like so. What do we think? Yeah, that one looks like it could maybe fall at any second, but that's quite okay. Looks like it's holding for now. And then I think what I'll do is I'm going to do a few little kind of leaves and flowery bits and bobs popping all around, just to kind of add a little bit extra bits and pieces. So let's see, I'm going to mix a little bit of blue here, as you'll see me do. And then let's see, let's imagine maybe a kind of a leaf poking here with blue leaves. Imagine that kind of going on the side of our pumpkins. walking through right here. And then maybe another little stem escaping this way. And then I'll connect all of these with, I think, some black. I'll connect all these little leaves with a little bit of black. Here we go. And my paper is warping a little bit, as you see, because I haven't taped it down. I want it to be able to go to the edge, and I'm not working with a very big piece of paper, but that's okay. I can definitely weigh that down when I'm done so that it's not warped. So what I'll do is I'll wait for it to be completely dry, and then I'll kind of bend the paper kind of like this back and forth until it's as straight as I can get it. And then I'll weigh it down with a few very heavy books, and then I'll give it plenty of time. About 24 hours usually is what I do, just to make sure that it's nice and weighed down. And usually that does the trick, and then you'll get a nice flat piece of paper to work with that you can gift to someone or a frame or whatever you'd like to do. Okay, so let me see here. I'm going to try to connect these leaves now. So I'm just mixing a little bit of black, and I'm going to go ahead, just create a thin line and kind of connect these. And what's nice about it, when you do it when your leaves are still wet, or the paint is still wet like I'm doing, you get that kind of lovely pool of color that just kind of naturally enters the point where your leaf touches the stem, and it gives it that nice little bit of color. And I think that's really the joy of watercolor, is when you can kind of get that working at your advantage. And it's also just really pretty to see that happen. And it kind of does its own thing. You can't control exactly where the paint goes or how it travels, but that's kind of what makes it special. So I think that looks pretty nice here. I think what I'll do is add maybe another little piece of leaf going this way, traveling upwards. And what's nice also when you do this is to use a little bit more paint in certain areas and a bit less in others. That's really going to help make it feel kind of natural and organic. So see, some of my leaves are much darker in tone, some are a little bit darker. I'm leaving some areas with more white and some areas with a bit less white to kind of mimic where the light would travel through those leaves. And I'm just making a very simple tear shaped, by the way, to make those leaves. And you'll see, if you look closely, a lot of the leaves don't look the same, nor should they. And that's kind of what makes it look nice, I think. Okay, so let's see. I'm gonna make my long stem, connect it here, and then go ahead and connect all those little leaves to the stem, like so. There we are. I think that looks pretty nice. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and make my stem on the top of my pumpkin, that last one. Maybe make a bit of a more exaggerated stem for that one here. Let's see. So I'm gonna have it start here, right where all my wedges meet, like so. And then maybe this one can curve like this. And there we go. And I think what I'll do to finish off is take a little bit of my gray paint here that I have left over, water it down quite a bit so that it's not too dark. And I'm gonna create a bit of a shadow, kind of starting here, moving around my leaves, kind of sitting right here. Imagining that shadow as the kind of pumpkin hits the ground. And there we go. There we have it. A pretty simple 3 kind of tiered pumpkin with shades of blue. So if you make this, I would love for you to tag me, of course, at Khaki and Bloom, and let me know what you've made. And if you do it with other colors, I would love to see that as well. So there you have it.